everyone's week 3. I hope everyone's week 3 is going well. And we're excited to have you join us today to talk about resume development, especially as it relates to preparing for the upcoming career fair. So very excited to have you all here. And thank you so much for our employer relations team and my fellow colleague, Aisha, who's here to also support this and make sure that we're getting questions and things answered in the chat. So just very grateful to everyone. I want to note that I should be joining on camera pretty shortly. I'm having a little bit of a technical difficulty, but I hope to join very shortly with my camera as well. But just so excited to have you all here. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of jump in. We're going to talk a lot about resume today, and we're going to take questions throughout this time as well. So I'll be going through the different sections of a resume, talking about what you may want to think about including. I'm hoping that we'll engage as well. So if you have questions that you have along the way, feel free to ask those as you see them kind of related to that slide. And then I'll take some more generalized questions at the end as well. And I do plan to do a little bit of engagement activity with you all. So I just would ask that you all engage the best that you can in these conversations, as it's going to be to your benefit as we prepare for this upcoming career fair coming up on October 6th and October 7th. So we have 2 days of just wonderful employers that are coming out to network with you all. So very excited for this opportunity. If I can move to the next slide. So I want to just start, for those of you that may not be as familiar with the Career Center, what we do, and we do so much. Many students I talk to, they're like, I didn't even realize you did this. So I just want to make sure that you are aware of the different ways that we can support you. But we help with everything from exploring more about who you are. What does that mean? It's your interest, right? The things that you're passionate about, that you enjoy, your values, what brings you meaning, right? What's important to you. Even things like maybe skills or abilities that you have at this point that you're hoping to build on, and how that might engage in thinking about different career paths. So we do help with that. We also help with researching different options. So researching majors, career paths, to help you to make a more informed decision and learn about the world of work. We also support students with learning how to connect with employers with events like this series. Also, again, our upcoming fairs, which give you the direct opportunity to engage with employers and put those networking and your skills into practice. We have a lot of online tools. I won't go through them all, but I would really encourage you all, if you have never visited our website, to do so. And there is, if you type in, I tend to go to Google, right? If you do CSUS Career Center, it's going to come up for you. You can also see us under the Student Life tab from the main little hamburger up in the upper right-hand corner of the Sac State website. And then again, we have a lot of events and workshops, so definitely check in Handshake for that. You can see our different events and workshops, as well as we support students through one-on-one meetings.
I was gone. What's your mom's name? I probably was gone.
Oh, yep. Just a reminder, folks, to make sure that you have the way that you're joining through mute.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to jump to the next slide. All right, so the career development process, some of you may have seen this already on our website, but again, it's going to that piece of knowing yourself, right? Who you are, learning about your interests, your values, your skills, and connecting that to those that explore your options. So you can kind of think about how that connects to different directions that you may want to go. We are in the decide, prepare, and engage, right? Because at some point you're going to have to make at least a first decision, right? Most people may not do the same career for their entire life. They may even try different opportunities to get that exposure and experience. So, but at some point they're going to have to pick something, right, in order to apply to and where to start. And so, again, we support with that. One of the ways that we do that is through resume development and teaching you how to effectively write a resume and cover letter. As well as things like interview strategies, how to search for more opportunities, all those things. You'll see gain experience. So that might be things like internships, right? I can't express how important that is, gaining internship experience. Research shows again and again that those that participate in internships and other experiential learning like student clubs are, that increases their hiring chances right after graduation because they have that direct experience. And so really encouraging that. And then continuing to enrich and adapt your skills, right? Because we know that life and the world of work is continuously changing. We have things like AI that continues to build. And so we need to continue to look at our role as a growth mindset and increasing our skills. Okay. And I think we can go to the next slide. So we're going to get into resume writing. I'm just going to stop and see if anybody has any questions so far. No questions. Folks are feeling pretty good. They know what we do. Maybe you've stopped by or you've gotten that support prior. So glad to hear about that. And yeah, so let's talk a little bit about resume writing. And I'll go ahead and we'll move to the next slide here. Resume writing, right? We're going to start off with even your contact information. So that's what you're going to see at the very top of your resume. I'd encourage you to look at this slide, look it over here. Some of the things that you want to make sure that you have are your name, right? So many times we might see things like first and last name. If you have a preferred name, sometimes we'll see that in quotes after your first name, if that's not your legal name. Oftentimes we're seeing folks move away from a full address and typically listing their city and state. Sometimes their zip code as well as a phone number and an email address. And optional would be a LinkedIn, though we definitely encourage folks to consider adding a LinkedIn address as well. With the phone number, I just want to remind you all, how many of you, and go ahead, if you want to put that in the chat, don't necessarily have to, but how many of you have called yourself lately? How many of you have given yourself a call? And I'm going to say, many folks may be saying, I don't know, I haven't really done that before. I've never thought about calling myself. That is so important because I will tell you that if you haven't listened to your voicemail lately, you may need to go check it out. I've had students share things like, I don't know if I didn't know that I needed maybe a voicemail message. Now you can have the generalized number, but if you're calling someone and you hear a more personalized message, like you've reached and your name and that you look forward to giving them a call back, you're probably going to leave a little bit more information. So just something to kind of think about, right? Is what does your voicemail say? Also, is it full, right? Some of you might have had that experience where, you go to call yourself, maybe it's not you, right? Somebody calls you and they say, I tried to call you. I tried to leave a voicemail, but your voicemail was full. Imagine if you're in your job search and an employer is trying to call you. They may call you once. They may even try calling you twice. After that, they haven't been able to reach you. So it's very, very important that you are checking your voicemail and setting that up. Also, your email address. I'm going to ask you all just to reflect. What does your email address say right now? Is it professional? Does it say maybe your name, maybe some numbers? Do the numbers actually even reflect something like your age? Not wrong, right? But what are you telling the individual, the employer, as they're looking at your email address? And again, making sure too that you're able to receive those messages and that you're checking it regularly. So for those of you that do not check that email that you're listing regularly, you may miss that opportunity. So I'd also encourage you, check it daily. It should be something that you're doing at least once a day. Employers will expect that you're going to respond within 24 hours. Often they hope sooner. And so that's really important that you're checking that regularly and that you're also checking your spam box, okay? Especially as employers may reach out and send messaging. So definitely an important aspect. And I think we can go on to the next one here. All right, the professional summary. And okay, can you all hear me okay?
We have an echo.
Yeah, a little bit of an echo.
Okay. How about now?
Oh, much better.
Okay, great. All right. Okay, so I want to share too that the space like the professional summary is so important. This might be kind of an introduction of yourself. This may be a space where you're kind of sharing a little bit more about who you are and your experience, an overall statement about your experience. I can finally see you all now. Hello. It's great to see you all. Yes, the summary section is really going to be an overview of your experience. So it may you may see things like skills that you have specifically or overarching experiences. I have maybe over 3 years of experience in customer service or 4 years of experience utilizing government documents to relay grant requirements. Whatever it is, it should be kind of overarching statements about your experience and maybe even some of your skills. However, one thing we need to think about is this really all needs to relate back to the position that you're applying to, right? So although we might create a generalized summary, maybe something on our LinkedIn, or maybe our main resume has kind of a generalized summary, it's so important that we're actually looking at that and saying, how is this connected to the position that I'm applying to you, right? So you see those elements there, who you are, what is your expertise, and then again, those strengths and what you're bringing to the table. And a lot of times those may be things like skills and experience. All right, next slide.
Michelle, I have a quick question, a question that was asked directly. What about referring back to the header part of the resume?
Yeah.
What about keeping your phone number private until you expect a call to avoid spam calling?
Oh, you know what? This is such a good question. And I don't know, the context of this, but I have heard sometimes from students that sometimes they've been maybe posting it somewhere, like Indeed or another platform. And so I'm wondering, and I could be wrong, if it has more relation to do with that, like if they're posting it somewhere. And in that case, I will say it's not the most common way that folks get an opportunity. It's probably one of the ways that I've heard folks do, but really to increase the odds of a position that you're particularly interested in that fits your skill, more likely you may need to be applying directly to it, right? Directly to that role. And so I would say, yes, if it's something that you're posting somewhere, even your address, really personal information, I would not recommend putting out there. And so I'm not sure, I'm wondering though if it might be in that context. If it's applying to a specific job, let's say an organization that you should only be applying, right, to organizations that you trust, or you've done a little research on, those, I would encourage you to put a phone number because they may not reach out to you if you do not have that listed. Yeah. Are there any other questions that are coming through?
Yes, I just wanted to highlight a question that was asked and also answered by one of our other career counselors, but I think it's good for others to hear. Is the summary like a condensed cover letter? And the answer we got was the summary is more of an intro, a spotlight of what you bring to the table as a candidate.
Yes, so I get this question sometimes like, do I even need a cover letter because I have a summary? The answer is I'd recommend it, particularly if they've asked for it, or it's optional. If it's optional, it means you have other people that are going to be including it in their application materials, which means that they're having extra time and space to talk about their experience and why they're the most qualified candidate, as well as what they know about the organization. So we're going to talk briefly about cover letters at the end here. But yes, absolutely. It may be a little bit more of usually just a couple lines that are kind of reflecting a little bit more about what you're bringing to the table, as Aisha shared. And the summary, again, I'm seeing a question around that. Typically, maybe, sometimes I see it 2 statements, sometimes 3 statements. So it shouldn't be a huge list. I'd say no more than maybe 5 lines or bullet points, because you do want them to get down into some of the information about yourself. It really should be reference and context for what they're going to be seeing below, if that makes sense. It's an overarching statement about what you're bringing to the table, and they can read more about that and learn more about that experience below. All right, next slide, please.
I'm sorry, I was muted. I'm so sorry. In reference again to the header, someone was asking, would it be a good idea to use a Google Voice number instead of their own personal phone number, again, to avoid spam calls? Would that be a
Yeah,
recommended
I would say if
solution?
you're applying to an individual organization, that you're going to ultimately make the decision about that. I'm not as familiar with utilizing something like Google Voice, but I would say, is that the way that you want to continue to communicate with the employer? Because there may be some confusion around them if there's multiple ways that you're communicating, if that makes sense. And so if you're applying to an individual organization that you're aware of and you are very excited about, and you know that you're going to check your voicemail more commonly, I might use your phone number, right? But ultimately you're going to make your decision about that. Again, if you're posting it somewhere, which again, I don't know that that's the most effective way that students obtain opportunities is just by posting their resume. They might get a lot of different calls for a variety of maybe different things that are not really related to what they were looking for. And so that targeted search is also part of your plan. And, maybe not as related to this topic. It's job search and it's so important. And I'd encourage you to come and talk to us about that if you have questions about that job search and how you're navigating that. But again, if it's something that you can communicate back and forth and you feel like that's the way you're going to communicate with an employer, but I would say in most cases, an employer will expect that they're going to have a phone number that they can contact and reach you directly. Yeah. All right. I'm going to jump into education. Education. Now, this is a tricky one. Sometimes I get students, the most common question I get is, should education come first or experience? Right? So some of you might be thinking that question in your head as well, or maybe heard that question come up. And it's really going to depend. Resumes are so subjective, right? There's not always just one way to do it. In fact, there's even different formats of resume. We're going to go over a couple of them today. But what I will say is it really is dependent on which one is maybe more critical in highlighting your skill set for the position you're applying to. And so I'll give an example. A recent grad that graduated, in let's say business administration marketing and is applying for a marketing position and maybe has a little experience, but they're really leaning in on their education. They're probably going to put their education first, right? Because the employer typically, we almost see it when I've attended webinars that talk about even eye tracking of how employers are seeking and looking through candidate information, they spend a little bit more time at the top, right? And then it kind of gradually gets a little less as you go down the page. And so what I would say with that is you want to have the most important critical information as high up as you can and clear and easy to read. So you're seeing kind of an example here. But again, if I have somebody that has they graduated 5 years ago and they have extensive experience in something, maybe they move that education right after experience or right after their education. Or I'm sorry, before their education, experience and then education, because they're really wanting to highlight that experience. So it really just depends. And then how you'll typically list it, we want to put the formal title of the degree. So we're going to have our title as education, followed by the name of the degree. You can see Bachelor of Arts in Psychology or Bachelor of Arts, Psychology is common, followed by the name of the university in which you got it from, California State University, Sacramento, and when you expect to receive it. So you can see expected or expected graduation and the month and year you expect to graduate. Anybody wonder, put in the chat, why are we using the month and not the semester, like fall or spring? What do you think? Yeah, we see up. Yes. Oh, yes. Okay. Employers don't have the semester start dates, job start dates. Exactly, right? They don't know what that means. And in fact, Sac State versus other universities might be on a quarter versus a semester system. And so it's not clear to them, right? So it's really important to put that month and year so they have a very clear understanding of when you're going to complete that degree. Great job, all. Also, you can see some sub-education categories like honors, technical skills, languages. These are all optional, just ways to kind of further showcase your experience. And so you could see this person listed honors, some of their technical skills that they have. We're seeing an increase in skills around generative AI or artificial intelligence, so ChatGPT, other programs like that. If you have those skill sets can be also kind of neat to add, but you've used a lot, right, as a student. So definitely adding those, Microsoft Office, Zoom, and some of the programs that you've learned, especially as it relates to the organization that you're applying to and the job description has. Languages, I typically say if you speak multiple languages to include it. It may be less critical to some roles than others, but a good thing to kind of think about. And minors can be listed. Minors are typically listed under your degree. So it might say Bachelor of Arts in Psychology, and then right underneath it might say minor right? In or comma or colon, and then what you're getting your minor in. Yeah, these are great questions. Fluency of the language, typically we want to be pretty fluent, okay? You should be, they expect that you're going to be able to speak. So if you put that that you are language, that you speak French or Spanish, you should be able to speak Spanish. Sometimes people will use bilingual or biliterate if they need to clarify that maybe they only have skills in one, but something you definitely want to know about. All right, and I'm going to jump to the next section. High school, the great questions coming in around high school. I will say high school should really be, once you're getting your degree or working towards your degree here, they're going to assume that you have the equivalent of high school. So you can actually remove high school at that point. Now, I will say community college or associate degree, you may add that in there, to showcase that you have that degree at this point and you're still working towards your bachelor's degree, or maybe you're applying to a position with the community college or at that high school. That might be a reason to add it on, right? So there can always be like circumstances why you might include these things, but in general, your high school you no longer need to add it once you have you're working towards your bachelor's degree. And then skills, I would list the skills. You might create a master resume, but I would encourage you to list skills that relate to the job that you're applying to. They're getting, let's say 100 applications, right? And so you really need to think about, how am I focusing it to this one? How am I focusing it to this specific job? You could see some sample subcategories under education or things like achievements, credentials, language skills, related coursework. Maybe you're taking some classes that are really related to the job that you're applying to, or an internship that you're applying to, and you want to showcase, look at these classes that I've taken. We want to avoid listing it as like Psych 10. They're not going to know what Psych 10 is, right? So using the full title can be very helpful. Gives them a sense of what it is that class is about. Would be good. All right, I'm going to just stop for a second. It looks like I have some questions in here. I think I've answered the question about school. If you're, even as a first year, like I said, if you have, if you're working and if you've kind of confirmed what your degree is in, you really don't necessarily need to list your high school education anymore. Yes, they may need that for, they may ask about that in an application. So it's really, but they're going to assume that you've met that minimum requirement of completing high school or equivalent because you're getting your bachelor's degree, right? So these are really good questions. Public speaking, they could be, it may go under something like, it could depend, could be if it's, volunteering or community involvement, could be listed something like that. If you were somehow doing kind of volunteering or something in that capacity, that might be, an example of that. If we have some time, I might go into some additional examples of that. And then do you include study abroad? Yeah, you could put study abroad. You could list that as like a sub-education category and list where you've studied abroad. That's really cool.
Michelle, I saw another question that said, what if you had multiple minors? Would each be a new line or comma separated?
Yeah, so, it kind of depends. It gets tricky, right? If it's both of it, a Bachelor of Arts, you could probably list them both there, right? In this and this, right? If it's a Bachelor of Science, or I'm sorry, an Associate of Science, or I'm sorry, you're listing minors. Okay. Minors, you could list multiple minors. That would be fine. If you're getting 10 different minors, I might ask why you're maybe doing the 10 different minors, right? But I might just list the one that's, the one or two that's most related to the role. You're really always thinking from the perspective of the employer. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go to the next slide. Okay, I'm going to try to engage y'all here. Are we ready? We're going to get you to respond in the chat, okay? And always thinking that other people are also reading your comments, so let's keep them professional and make sure that we're responding appropriately. But I want you to think about, right? Imagine that you're an employer. Okay, sometimes I think we want to look at the lens of how an employer might be seeking a candidate. So imagine you're an employer and seeking a candidate for an upcoming internship or job, right? You're going to be doing that. You're on the hiring committee. You're going to be hiring somebody for the position. You can even think for a moment about a position that you've been in or that maybe you're familiar with, that you'd be looking for a candidate that met those skills, right? I'm going to ask you, what might you be looking for in the candidate and their application materials? Just in general, what would you be looking for? Go ahead and put that in the chat. So you are an employer. What would you be looking for from a candidate based on a specific job that they're seeking? And you're seeking to hire somebody to do that role. Oh, I'm seeing a lot coming in here. Somebody that's a team player, experience to the relative. Oh, yes, Samantha, absolutely. The focus there, related experience. We're getting it, right? I would look for someone with experience, good communication skills, and a team working, depending on the situation, right? So we're getting back to it kind of depends, right, on the role. If they have 10 years of relevant experience, like, yeah, maybe somebody that has more experience, they might want to highlight that. Relevant coursework. Yes, have they taken related courses to this? Do you seem like you understand the need or the job I need? Do you seem like I could work with you? Yes, absolutely, right? And some of this they're doing through both the resume, looking through application materials. Some of it might be through the interview process. Excel skills. Yes, Excel tends to still be a high one, though it might depend on the role, right? Experience and skills. Skills, yes. School personal projects, a portfolio, certificates. I love this. How do they respond to problems? Clear and easy to read application. You're doing great, right? But one thing that I'm overarchingly hearing in this, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing, right, is I need to showcase my experience. I need to showcase my skill set. I need to showcase that it in a really easy way so that the employer can quickly find the information, right? One thing that I kept hearing over and over is like, you know, um, is it related, right? And so the employer is looking from that lens too. They might say, that's so great that you have this, this, and this. Wonderful. But I need somebody to do this, this, and this, right? How do you know that? You're looking at the job description. The job description is telling you, right? These are great. You all are doing amazing. Yes, I love it, Aisha. Go Hornet Resume Jedis. Yes, yes, this is amazing. Okay. All right. I'm going to go to the next slide here. So now that we've talked about that, how are we doing that in our own resume, right? So you can see the work experience in a chronological resume. I'm going to compare and contrast this to a functional resume in just a moment, but chronological is the most common type of resume. It's the most commonly expected type of resume from an employer perspective. Really, it is used in a way to highlight and showcase your related experience in the positions that you've been in to the job that you're applying to. So you can see an example here, right? Experience, that might be the category. It could be listed as work experience. It might be listed as experience. Maybe you weren't paid for it, but you did it 20 hours a week, right? That could still be under an experience category, right? And then we're going to list it. The way that we typically might see this listed is the title, the company that you worked at, the city, the state, and the dates in which you worked, month and year to month and year, or present. Now, sometimes we're even encouraging students to think outside of the word present, maybe put that in parentheses, but put their current month and year just because of applicant tracking systems, which I'll kind of get into a little bit later. But what I really, again, I'm encouraging you to kind of think about is how am I showcasing what I did in my role, in my past experiences to the job that I'm applying to? And so I want you to rethink these rather than just bullet points, right? Sometimes I hear sentences. These should be accomplishment statements. We call them accomplishment statements. Why do you think we all call them accomplishment statements? Any guesses? I'll have you put that in the chat. Why should they be accomplishment statements? Okay. Aspects that you might include in these might include things like what you did, how you did it, right? So what exactly did you do? How did you do it? Maybe it was the tool or the way in which you completed it, right? What, how, with who? Was it a team project? Was it individually? You may not need to say if it's individually, right? But if it was part of a team, you might want to emphasize that. Who was it for, right? Sometimes even a why, right? If it's maybe not clear. So we really want to think about like these as accomplishment statements. And the accomplishment also comes from using data. So you can see an example here. Wrote, so they're starting off with a past tense action verb. Typically, all of your accomplishment statements are going to start off with an action verb. Most commonly, we see them all in past tense. There can be some exceptions to that, okay? So I've heard some folks that will use it if they're currently in the role in present tense and the rest in past tense. But when in doubt, past tense action verb is great. Past tense action verb. Wrote, so that's the action verb, over 24 business letters. That's what they did, right? That's the what, right? 2 local companies. That's to who, right? To request sponsorship for the agency. That is a why. They're kind of getting a little bit more insight. Like, what is this for? Which increased agency funding by 15% over the year. So now they're showcasing their accomplishment. I increased something by 15%. I'm using a percentage, right? But that also could be numbers. Assisted over 100 customers a day, right? Or led marketing efforts through these different social media platforms on a daily basis, right? So you're saying how often you did it and what you're responsible and how you did it, right? So those accomplishments are really important. I'm seeing a question. How can we structure high school related accomplishments? Yes. So you can still list those, right? You could, now it's going to depend. You could list it under things like, like club involvement that you've been part of, right? And we're going to get into that a little bit later down here. But if you were part of programs or clubs, you might list it that way. You could list projects, So there's some different ways that you could list what you did. If it's if it was like work experience during that time or an internship, that absolutely can go on your resume as well. So, I may not be able to get into the details of your specific example, but that's where I'm going to encourage you. Come and talk with us, right? We're here to support you. And I'm going to give you some resources, some examples for this. These are really good questions, though. All right. So again, the title, the company, city, state, the dates, and accomplishment statements. Very, very important that we're highlighting that. Okay, I'm going to go to the next sample here. You're going to see work experience and a functional resume, okay? This is a different style of resume. I'm going to say it's less common. It's also less typically preferred by an employer, okay? And the reason is they cannot see exactly what you did under the position that they're looking at, right? So you can see they're still listing work history. You can see that kind of at the bottom of this slide, work history. They were a fitness counselor at Seasons Personal Fitness Center in Carmichael at this date, right? So you can still see that they worked at this organization, right? But they don't know where these different skills and knowledge came from. So that is kind of the challenge with it. The benefit of it is sometimes folks are looking to showcase, or I should say, I want to go to another challenge. The other challenge is that we're seeing with applicant tracking systems, they don't always read these very well. And so we really encourage chronological resumes more commonly just in this, due to that ATS and the applicant tracking system process of them reviewing your resume and trying to pull data from it. And they look for sections called like experience and dates and things like that. But sometimes, right, if somebody is really like, maybe they haven't had any work experience, right? Maybe there hasn't been any work experience yet, or maybe they've been out of work for a while. Maybe it's been 5 years since they've worked, or maybe they're going into something completely different and they already kind of have a networking contact there and they want to provide a resume that showcases transferable skills. That might be the reason that you do this. And so you can see they created 3 categories. It's typically like 3, right? They put under relevant skills and knowledge and they'll list those 3 subcategories. So program development, they use management and supervision and project management to kind of highlight skills, right? And accomplishments, again, these are still accomplishment statements, just like you saw in the last resume example under like the chronological experience. You're still seeing those accomplishment statements, but all of these should be related to the job that you're applying to. I'm not going to go into too much more detail about this. I know that this can be a little bit challenging. I just want to give you also that information in case you're like, I don't know how I'm going to set up my resume because I don't have experience, or maybe there's gaps in my work history, or I'm just having a real hard time showcasing my skills to this other position. There are different formats of resumes that you may consider. But chronological is by far the most preferred by employers from what we've seen. Okay. All right. I'm just going to pause for a second and see if we have any questions that you all see in the chat that I haven't answered. Past startups count as experience. Yeah. Let's say you led your own business. Absolutely. You could totally do that. Maybe you're listing you can give yourself your title, maybe, what that title is, and then your company name, city, state, and dates. So that could be an option. Sometimes it kind of depends. Was it a formal business, right? If it's a formal business, absolutely. Absolutely you can. And you should, I should say. That's really valuable. Probably a lot of really powerful experiences came out of that, and you can showcase your accomplishments through that. Absolutely. Um, yes, these are great questions. Anything else? Let's see. How do I better present a long self-employed contract work position? Yeah. So if it's self-employed, and that can be a couple things, like sometimes people are like a contractor for a company. Sometimes it could be that they've created their own business, right? So that can look different ways for folks. But that could totally be listed as, and again, you'd give yourself what your title is, right? That title, which might be independent contractor or business owner, right? These are just a couple. There's certainly different ways that you could describe that, followed by what the name of your company or the organization, or if it was like through a long-term staffing agency, maybe you're listing that larger organization that you were doing a lot of work through, followed by the city, state, and dates. There are some aspects of this. Let's say you worked at lots of, maybe 3 different companies over the last 2 years, or you worked at a company and worked in different locations. So I will say there's some unique questions that you all may have, and we might want to take a look at that. I think about, students that I've worked with that are veterans, right? And they've had some unique experiences and how they want to showcase that. So what I'd say is, we're hoping to give you some basics today, some tips that you can use, but for more support, you can always come in and ask those individual questions, but keep them coming in here too. We'll certainly try to respond as quickly, as we can through that. Yes, I love it. You schedule an appointment. We're happy to meet with you. And I'd encourage you to do it sooner than later because the fair is coming up in the next couple of weeks and we will get busy. I just hate to say it, but we're going to get busy. So definitely get that scheduled. Our team would be happy to support you with that. Okay, let's see. Other experience categories. So we have activities, workshops presented, professional development. These are just a small list of the many that could be included. You'll see things like activities might be maybe being part of a club or organization. So maybe you had a leadership role there as the treasurer, and you were doing maybe 2 hours a week supporting that. You might list that. That's pretty powerful. Now, if you were doing 20 hours a week in a role like this, we may even put it under experience if we haven't had other experiences. Okay, so there's different ways that we can promote that on your resume. But these are just some samples. A member of an organization. By the way, do I have some folks in here that are part of clubs and organizations on campus? Feel free to put that in the chat, or you could set off an emotion, like a little emoji, thumbs up, right? I would definitely say these are great opportunities for you all. One, because I don't know about you all, but sometimes it's hard, right? Sometimes it's hard to make new connections and on campus. And so it's a really nice way to get to know folks and make connections on campus. It's also a bunch of folks that are kind of also interested in a similar industry. And oftentimes they might even bring in guest speakers. They're great for networking. They're likely maybe doing similar things that you might be thinking about doing. And so they can be very valuable. They usually are a little bit lower commitment than like an employment experience. So if you're like kind of on the fence, you're really trying to maybe see how you can start to get some exposure and experience, that's a great way to do that. Most of the time, and if I have any club leaders in here, feel free to kind of chime in. But sometimes even like being a member only requires like attending a few meetings. So lots of really great ways to get connected on campus. Yes, I'm seeing, do programs go under activities? Programs they could be like, it totally could be activities. It could be like, maybe a member of a specific program that you were part of that you did. Now, if you did a lot of work under that and it was ongoing, it might even become an experience. Okay. So if you're in doubt about this and you're feeling like, oh, it's kind of on the fence, come talk to us. That's a great opportunity to do that. Yes, thank you, Aisha, for putting that in the chat. There's lots of clubs and organizations that students can kind of explore. And I've just heard such fabulous things from folks of being able to make connections there. Okay, workshops presented. Maybe you've presented a workshop, right? So here's an example, the title. Maybe you actually presented at a conference, or maybe you have, maybe even published articles. I've had some students do some really cool things. You may need to also list it based on the writing style of your industry. So, for example, I am in the psychology area, right? So I follow APA format, and so you may need to look into that with your based on your industry standard for how you list that for some of the professional positions you're thinking about. Professional development, these could be things that you've attended, like maybe you attended the leadership conference on campus that just happened in fall, right? Or maybe other professional development that you've been involved with, trainings or things. Again, always asking yourself though, I can make a full list on here in a master resume, but how is this connecting back to the job, right? If I'm going into page 2 and I'm working towards my bachelor's degree and it has a lot of things that are just not as related, I may need to ask myself, do I really need everything on here? Because the employer may not get to page 2, right? And they may be losing some really important stuff. All right. We go to the next section here. Awesome. Some additional resume categories that you might see are things like community involvement, right? Affiliations, professional development. You'll see like publications, like I mentioned, interests. That's kind of a hot topic. I see mixed reviews on that. Some employers are like, it's not really related. They won't commonly see that. I have other folks that say that's kind of neat. It's a good conversation starter. If in doubt, another thing that you can always do is if you have, like, maybe you're just trying to tie in your experience. Like I've had students that are like, I am an avid this, right? I'm just going to give an example. Maybe you're like, a rock climber. I don't know. I'm putting that out there. My kiddo is always talking about rock climbing. So maybe you're a rock climber, right? And that's what you do. You do it all the time. And you want to work for maybe Peak Adventures, right? And you're like, I've had no experience related to this, but I do it every weekend. That might be a reason to talk about that in your cover letter or add it in your interest because it's really connected to the job that you're applying to, right? So sometimes those can be neat opportunities. You'll also see things like it could be, international experiences. So study abroad could be here. Again, it could also be a sub-education section. It just depends on where we want to list it. Research, projects, etc. So there's a lot of different ways that you can add some of these categories. Can't possibly go into all the minute details of this in our hour here today, but want to let you know that those exist. I'm going to go to the next page here. Avoiding common mistakes. So considering the length, I'm getting some questions here on pages, right? Resume page length is subjective. I will say some organizations and some industries will look to see that a person keeps it to a page. Typically, it can also connect to what your level of study is. Like if you're a doctoral student, you might have several pages, right? That's pretty normal. A grad student may have a few pages, right? I usually tried to stick to like 2. I know when I was going through grad school. At the bachelor degree, you may have to ask yourself if you have a very extensive resume, it could be due to spacing and how formatting is, and that might kind of sum this up real quick. The other thing you have to ask yourself is, does this all relate to this job? Or am I adding everything I've ever done? Because you're really then asking the employer to search and dig and find those related experiences, which you don't want to do, right? If they have 100 applicants, I've heard, and folks feel free to chime in on our ER team or Aisha here too. I've heard anywhere from 6 to 30 seconds on your resume, right? From the data I've seen. That's not a whole lot of time. So if you got, a vast resume that you're submitting to everybody, it's going to be challenging. You may not get as many folks getting to page 2 or 3, right? So it becomes very important. Yes, concise is really important. Don't write in the first person. So we want to avoid, I, me, we. It should go right into the action verb. And then who is that? Who is that you serve? Not them. It's, students or clients or children or whoever that is. We need to be precise. And we want to connect it back to the job that we're applying to. Consider the order of categories and experiences. We kind of talked about that. Some of those additional categories may go towards the bottom, but even those you might have to ask yourself, how am I organizing these? Or if I do my education above my experience, or my experience right now maybe is above my education, but my education is the stronger attribute, I may need to switch that. Develop accomplishment statements. I can't stress this enough. I get so many students that I know struggle because they're like, yeah, but look at all the things that I've done, right? Our resumes, I just want to stop. They're so personal, right? They're so personal. We're often really proud of the work that we've done, even if it was 10 years ago, right? We're connected emotionally to some of this. However, we need to look from that employer lens and ask ourselves, are we asking that employer to dig, right? Or are we presenting this in a way that's very quick and easy for them to navigate? Page, your references typically should be on a separate sheet under references. That's another thing that's common. We'll see sometimes like, additional references here at the bottom that it belongs on its own page and is typically asked for after, or you might see it as in a separate document that they ask you to attach. And then please, please, please double check it for spelling, grammar, and typos. And the reason for that is, this is your first impression. It might be your only impression. So if there's a lot of errors, even one or two errors, if I'm honest, they might move to the next person. Okay. And that is partially because, this is your first impression. And they're saying, if you do this here, you're going to do this at your first day on the job, right? If you're doing it, trying to showcase your first impression with us, it's going to happen in the role. And so we really want to double check. And if that's an area that's a little harder for you, what I will say is if you're a student on campus, you can also take advantage of the Writing Center here on campus for the spelling and grammar and kind of working on those skills too. They're a great resource. Okay. I'm going to go to the next one. Next slide here. Artificial intelligence. All right, I know this is a hot topic. We just want to note that you might be using it, and in some capacities, employers are using something called applicant tracking systems to kind of look at, screen through the many documents that they're receiving. So we're seeing both your ability to work with something like ChatGPT or whatever it is, these tools that, continue to kind of change in AI are skill sets that are hot. Excel tends to be a hot one too, right? They're things that are more commonly listed by employers. They're more commonly sought by employers. They're also looking for your critical thinking skills too. So let's say you started, something maybe you asked ChatGPT to write you a cover letter. And employer feedback that I have heard, right, in a lot of the data that I'm reading is they can see through it because they get the same looking cover letter back, over and over again. And so you really don't want to depend on a tool that does not know you, does not know your experiences to write something for you. It's a great maybe starting point, but it should not be your final point. We really need to work on that. And we definitely want to showcase that we have this critical thinking and those abilities to write, right? So again, great for draft. You definitely want to also think about how you're using it accurately. Is it really showcasing, honestly, your skill set? And ethically, right? Is it something that you created or you're having something else create? Because again, the feedback from employers is that might be an automatic reason that they say, I don't know if this is a good fit. Right. So we need to be very honest. We need to use it ethically, but it can be great to kind of brainstorm. I use it all the time for brainstorming. Our team has kind of been building our skills in that too. And we're finding it's so wonderful for brainstorming ideas and skills and, maybe great for a beginning draft, but again, don't lean on it and expect that it's going to do it for you. And then again, employers often are using systems that can sometimes recognize AI too. So that's really critical. And I'm going to go to the next slide here for the sake of time. Applicant tracking systems are used by most Fortune 500 companies. So these large organizations are using applicant tracking systems, which are really screening your materials, your resume, your cover letter for skills, right? Specific skill sets that might have been listed in the job duties, right? The duty statement, the listing, their organization, they're looking at this data. They're looking to see dates. Did you meet minimum requirements? And so if your format is not showcasing dates properly, if your format is not listing skills that relate to this specific job, you may not get the opportunity. Your scoring may come up very low for the employer. So just being very mindful of that. Templates tend to have trouble with that. So if you're using a template or even a table, that can be kind of challenging for these applicant tracking systems to use. You can see some of the examples that tend to be a little bit harder. Avoid putting, I've seen students be creative and do things like, I'm going to type in all these skills at the bottom in white. Employers see that through these systems. So we don't want to do that, right? We want to showcase honesty, integrity, and also highlight, the skills that we have and make sure that we're cross-referencing that job duty statement or those job duties to highlight the skills. Using current dates is really important. And then saving it as a new PDF before you submit it each time. If you're using the same PDF over and over again, you might start to have issues with that PDF and the systems won't read it very well. You might also find that again, that also is just not the best strategy for searching for positions because employers say, that's great, you have a lot of skill sets, but it doesn't relate to this specific job, right? And then chronological resumes tend to be preferred in this. I'm going to go to the next slide here. All right, cover letter writing. And just to note, we have this in our handbook, so it's a great resource. But again, you're going to have the same heading typically as your resume. So you can copy and paste that into your new Word document or Google Docs. Typically the date that you're writing it. This next section, and I know this is kind of small, but it's going to have the person that you're sending it to, their name, their title, their address, followed by a statement about who you're addressing it to. So dear, people are moving a little bit more towards first and last name might be listed. If you're, you see the example here, dear Miss Johnson, that's another strategy. I could spend an hour talking about cover letters, but what I will say is really this should be tailored to the position you're applying to. You want to highlight what it is, why you want to work there, right? What it is that you're applying to, why you want to be part of this organization. And you don't know why unless you've done the research. You want to highlight some key attributes and experiences. So again, it's not asking you to regurgitate your resume necessarily, but maybe there's some things that you want to talk about a little bit more. Or I heard folks ask about programs that they were part of, or maybe special experiences or interests that they're having trouble kind of highlighting in their resume. This is a great place to kind of highlight that as it relates to the job, right? It needs to relate to the job. So in essence, it's an overview of yourself, right? Showing your interest, marketing yourself as a candidate, highlighting those achievements or those accomplishments, and making sure that you're showcasing you meet those relevant qualifications. And then saying that you're looking forward to those next steps and signing off, right? And so you'll see a sample of that in our handbook as well. All right, I'm going to go to the last slides here. I'm not going to do this activity just because we've had some amazing questions in here, but you'll see this is the type of thing that we see. We see sample resumes that maybe have some work to do. So I'm just going to really encourage you to check through your resume, look for those errors. Employers see them immediately because they're used to screening. I'm going to have you go to the next slide here. And then some of our featured tools. And just noting that, again, we have our job and internship handbook. We are working on an update, and it should be live anytime. I know that we've been working on some minor details to make it a virtual copy on our website, and it may be up already, or it will be up very shortly. So be sure to check back this semester for that. But in the meantime, this still has some great examples of our cover letters, resume examples that you can see. And again, you always have us as a resource. I'm going to go last slide, I think, is just also highlighting our upcoming job and internship fair. You all are coming to this to prepare for this, right? And other positions you're applying to. But don't forget, put this on your calendar, mark your calendars, right? However you do that, put that on, make sure you're writing it on your boards. You have this in your notebook. You want to be here. You want to be here day 1 and 2. This is a great opportunity to network, connect with people. You definitely want to be part of that. Yes, thank you, Maria, getting that in the chat in case you had questions about that. You can see all the employers that are coming too. Do some research ahead of time, right? Really important. You'll hear about that throughout our series. And then I'm going to go to the last slide here, which I think is just sharing that you can, our academy, which is coming up. We have that. We can go to the upcoming events and getting informed. This is following us. So if you want to follow us on our social media, you'll get reminders and information about our center and different events and programs that we have going on. And so it's a great way to get reminders throughout the semester. Great. Thank you for putting that in the chat too. So next steps, right? You're going to look at the handbook. You're going to take a look at that. You're going to make some changes based hopefully on the feedback that you got today. You know that we are here to support you. We do get more impacted as it gets closer to the fair. So if you try to connect with us the day before the fair, it's going to be a little harder. We have a lot of students coming in. So just really going to encourage you to make those appointments early, make them now. To get help if you have questions on your resume and cover letter. I'm so glad that you all attended today. Again, feel free to make that appointment. We have both in person or virtual. If you don't see a time or you're looking at a specific day and it only says one or the other, you may need to check another day, right? It can be dependent on the day and what gets booked, but definitely keep checking back for that. And then we also do have drop-ins. They're more designed for quick questions. So like, hey, I'm wondering this section of the format of my resume, did I do that? Is that kind of aligned with what employers are expecting? 15-minute question. If it's like, I would like to have somebody deeply review my resume and kind of go through the sections, probably a 45 minutes going to be a little better. So All right, that's what I had for you all today. It was so nice to meet you all. It was so grateful to have all of your engagement. I'll stick around for a moment in case there's any last questions. I can stick around for a minute if that's okay, to our ER team. Happy to answer questions that you all have. But again, so grateful to have you all here today, and I hope you have a wonderful time at the fair. We look forward to engaging with you this semester.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
Yeah.
Everybody who's in the room still, go ahead and take this time and put in either a heart in the chat box, or use your reaction button to show Michelle and Aisha some love on this wonderful presentation. I know everyone's filling with hearts, but I want to encourage you to scroll up a little bit in the chat box. We put some links in there. We have our last workshop with the Career Fair Prep Academy. That is nailing your first impression. That, please pay attention, is not virtual. It's going to be in person. It's going to be in the Union in the Pacific Suite. For those who have registered already, please note that time has changed. So the time frame was 2 to 3:30. It is now 1 to 2:30. Again, it's 1 to 2:30. So please note that time change. If you haven't registered, that's also in the chat box as well. Again, just to reiterate, if you want to take a look at some of the features and the resources that we have on the Career Center website, or need to make an appointment with a career counselor, again, the link is there. That's also in our chat box. And then also, if you could just take a few minutes, we listen to what you need. You know, our students, you're the reason why we do what we do. And I'm going to put this in again because this is very important. We have a workshop survey. If you can take a couple of minutes, please, to go ahead and complete this. I'm putting it again in the box right now. You can take time to go ahead and complete a survey. Give us your feedback. This helps us improve what we have. This helps us provide the topics and the help that you need as a student. You're going through what you're going through. We can't help you. We can't provide the materials or the topics that you need to be discussed unless we know what you need, right? Did we do a good job? Did we not do a good job? Please provide that. These answers are not gonna, we're not gonna cry. It's a safe space. Please, please, we appreciate your feedback. Okay, all right.
I
So
have a question.
yeah, please, yes, yes.
So I did try to make an appointment, but it's not allowing you to select for it. It allows you to select that it's advising, but the other options have nothing to do with what I am, because I already graduated. So I can't, I haven't been able to make an appointment for the Career Center.
Mm. Michelle, are you sure you want to
Yeah,
give that?
happy to answer that question. I don't know if you want to stop record at this point, because that's a very unique thing.